Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm not sure how, I think that there might be a creative idea out there, and I wouldn't know how to frame it in a motion, so I'm going to ask a council to come forward and talk about an option that might be available to us.
Well, good evening. Beverly Bonning, Troon Law Firm. I know you have quite a bit on your plate tonight, so I certainly don't expect you to make a decision on this tonight. I'm just asking that you take a look at a couple other options that we've been drawing on our notepads over there in the corner. Let me just refocus this conversation for a second for the purpose of the board's benefit as well as your community. What you have before you, just a lot of moving parts here where you're attempting to address the financial issues related to your operating side of your budget, your capital improvement issues on the other side of that are obviously necessary for the ongoing well-being of your buildings and your children within those buildings. And you have the dynamic of configuration and potential school closure on top of that. Let me first start out by saying that I go to school board meetings. I've lost count how many school board meetings I've been to in the past 26 years, from Escanaba to Adrian to Manistee to St. Clair Shores. And in the course of those school board meetings, I attend board meetings where there are school closures, and I can get in my car, drive home, let them make the decision, call me and tell me what my bond issue size is going to be. And it's a little more difficult when it's your hometown and in your community in which you've raised your children. It's much more difficult. I appreciate Chris taking the lead tonight as opposed to me. I've thought through your concerns, and it's my understanding that if you took Red Cedar offline, it would be 5 years out. Is that correct, Dave?
Approximately 4,
Going
going back
to
to
4?
the September
Okay.
9th.
Okay. That would begin 4-year count from 2012, September 2012, 4 years out, academic years.
Well, I think it depends on the construction schedule.
Okay.
We said approximately 2016. We didn't even say 15,
Okay.
16, or 16,
Or 16, 17. Okay, got it. And within that time frame, you have it's tea leaves, Ouija board, or crystal ball as to what's going to happen with your operating budget and enrollment and whatever MSU has planned to do with that corner of your community, if anything. So I talked to a couple board members, and we did not have a majority of the board present when I talked to them during the break. My thoughts would be that you would do K5, Pinecrest, Marble, Donley, Glencairn, White Hills, which I think is consistent with your earlier proposal. 6th grade to McDonald, funded with sinking fund millage. That construction, correct? That's not been contemplated?
Well, I don't know which working proposal you're referring to.
Okay. Suffice it to say,
There have been
McDonald
many.
either be in the bond issue or could potentially be sinking fund. The board's discussed both options in that context. Got it. With reference to Red Cedar, if you decided to do a wait and see on Red Cedar for the next 4 to 5 years, you could, as a board, determine that it would be scheduled for closure in 2016 to 2017. However, you could include in your bond issue a portion of funds set aside and not issued until the future for improving Red Cedar under certain circumstances, meaning that you'd still go forward with closure on Red Cedar out X number of years forward unless certain conditions changed in that area that would warrant keeping Red Cedar open, and you would have set aside a portion of the bond issue unissued
The
for
necessary
improvements.
funds.
Necessary funds, and you'd issue those bonds in a future series later. But that, my proposal is strictly from a bond counsel legal point of view. It's not based at all on any educational policies or concerns that you might individually have regarding Red Cedar, but it certainly does keep your options open relative to the next 5 to 6 years on a series of bonds, meaning you might do a second series later on a pre-approved bond issue by the voters in February that would impact what you're going to do to Red Cedar in the future. And that Board of Education, 4 years out or 5 years out, would determine, are we going to issue the second series of bonds within the context of whatever your taxable value is at that time, and whether it's a 0 net millage increase or possibly millage increase, depending upon the financial circumstances and interest rates
So
at the
the
time.
dollar figure would be somewhat indeterminate.
Well, you'd have to
from
decide
now.
that when you'd have to decide what that would be going into your meeting with the Department of Treasury now,
Oh, okay,
what the improvements would be
right.
on that series of bonds. So I certainly don't intend to attempt to direct the board one way or another. I want to make sure, and I think it's very important for the board and the community to know that any options your professional team has put before you for the past 2 years has been always based upon giving you all of the information that you need to make decisions within the information that you have. There's never been information provided by your financial advisor that was intended to sway you to do a full 62 million or 63 million. It's always been intended to make sure you know exactly what all your options are financially and legally before you go into making any decisions regarding the scope of a project. So with that, that is also something that exists out there, that you can do your bonds in series, provided that when you meet with Treasury, you disclose that, and you also, as the Board of Education, disclose what your intent is relative to those improvements to that building in the future. Do you have any questions for me?
Time frame in terms of us putting together, if we were to go this route and basically go for the maximum amount or as close thereto as we feel is appropriate, we're in September, and
Right.
if we are to meet with the bond authority at the state, we would have to have the conditions and the proposed improvements to Red Cedar laid out as part of the package that was going over.
I
to
would
them.
recommend that, yes.
So we would say, you know, we are going to rebuild, or we are going to refurb, or we're going to do whatever it is to X, Y, and Z of that facility if the following bullet points are met relative to that property.
That's correct. Again, that assumes that the Board of Education is making a decision that all things stay the same between now and 2016-17 or 2015-16, that Red Cedar is slated for closure. And it certainly gives sufficient amount of time for the organization and the community to respond appropriately to that decision in terms of educational needs, financial needs, and building needs and transition.
When do you need this information from us?
The school district's meeting with the Department of Treasury, I believe, is November 3rd. Isn't it the
Or
first week
10th.
of November, Ted?
Can't
Yeah.
remember the date
I don't remember.
exactly.
I think it's,
Third.
and technically, the latest you really should be going with a meeting with the Department of Treasury is November 15th, because they need 30 days to process the application, and then you call the election December 22nd, I think it is. Chris, isn't that the election law deadline to call the election this year for February? Is December 22nd or 23rd, somewhere around there, right?
So-
70 days before the election date.
So pragmatically, for us to act and give you the information you need, what date do you need it in your hands?
Well, that's actually a question for Ted and the architect, because they have to prepare all the documents for the Department of Treasury's meeting.
Okay, whoever can answer that question.
Don't you need about 3 weeks, Ted? Yeah, about 3 weeks.
Uh,
I'm sorry if I'm speaking for you, but isn't it about 3 weeks? Yeah, okay.
I thought it was the end of this week. No?
That would be the ideal, and I think in conversations with Dave, he said if we pushed it to next week, that would be comfortable for us, knowing that we have to clearly outline.
No, can you come forward?
We're certainly, trying to give you as much time as possible to make this a good decision. We had agreed upon sort of tonight is the appropriate time to make that decision. That's what sort of got us to this date. I know Steve Hooksman, our office, has had subsequent conversations with Dave that said maybe another week. We could still make. The difficulty is obviously further defining that scope, what's going to happen in each of these buildings. And we have to define that for each of these, and now to work through with you a process of defining those bullet points of what's appropriate for Red Cedar, given a certain set of circumstances. So I think that's going to take a little time to shake out as well. So typically we'd like a month. There's a lot of moving parts still, so the application isn't really as far as we would like it to be.
One of the things that concerns me, obviously I'm very interested in the potential, because a lot of us have talked about, well, what if? One of the things that concerns me, though, is how do we know what to build in the other 5 if we don't know whether or not Red Cedar would be online? That
It doesn't matter to me.
There's a certain amount, and you understand the structuring of the series piece, there's a certain amount that the Treasury will let you build for.
Right.
They don't let you make one